Radio Free Skaro!
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Radio Free Skaro, episode number 1060. I am Stephen in Camrose.
Warren in Vancouver.
And Chris in Edmonton.
Have I ever done my... I grew up and was born in Camrose, and I'm back at my parents' place for this recording. I'm trying to think if I've ever recorded one of these.
I don't think you have.
You
or
know,
at least you haven't admitted to it on air.
That's true. Yeah, I don't know. No, the reason I'm here is because I played a rock and roll show last night here in Camrose, and being the first day of spring in Alberta means giant snowfall, which
of course
blocked roads, and even I think the train literally blocked the only road out of town on my way home last night, and it was snowing anyway. So I thought, you know what, I want to take this as a universal sign and head back and stay at the parents' place. Fortunately, I thought ahead though, and brought the old secondary recording control room, essentially, with this microphone and not just in case I had to record this. So I'm recording this in my childhood home. I'm recording this in the basement where you can't see it, but I'm pointing where my homemade console that was built around a bar stool and a bunch of cardboard and a lampshade as the thing, and I put styrofoam plates all on the walls, but because it was, you know, a house.
No wonder you got all the girls,
right? Oh God, I was so popular. Let me tell you, that's literally all that happened in this basement. Let me tell you, and being a house of the 1970s, all the walls are wood paneled, so it looks like the secondary control room. So I am
familiar with this. Yeah. I had a Laserdisc player in my basement, so I think I'm the cooler one here.
Wow, that is impressive. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
No, I did a lot of my Doctor Who watching in this very basement in my youth, so it's fitting on this historic episode of 1060th episode of Radio Free Skaro that I'm back where it all began. Mm-hmm. In this, as we lead up after we lead up to the 20th anniversary celebration of this very podcast later this year.
Feted throughout the land, I'm sure.
Hugely.
The land being Camrose, Vancouver, and Edmonton.
I know. I'm looking forward to the...
by feted, I'm assuming you mean FETID, not FETED.
No, I think we're owed a letter of congratulations from the Prime Minister of Canada.
I think we're owed the white man's oath. I think I'm owed.
I think I'm owed.
For various reasons I won't get into that are racist.
When the podcast hits 100 years old, you get a letter from the Queen.
That's true.
Who's 200 years old?
No, there'll be a new Queen by then. It'll be fine. We'll be going through monarchs like we're going through...
Prime ministers.
British prime ministers, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. What's her name? I can't even think of her name anymore. The one who was outlasted by a cabbage.
Liz Truss.
Liz Truss. I was going to say Liz Fair, but that's someone entirely different.
Way cooler. Way cooler.
Anyway, on this podcast, it's weird. It's so weird. I've been missing episodes. Post missing episodes Euphoria for the past week that it feels weird to not talk about. We will talk about them. But Paul Hayes, who of course wrote the excellent books Pull to Open and The Long Game, each about the gestation of the old series and the new series, has put together a documentary about the 70th anniversary of the movie Flight into Danger, made by the CBC back in 1956. And you think, why would we cover that here? Well, that was, it starred James Doohan, future star of Star Trek, but also the producer of it was...
And Canadian.
And the producer of it was one Sydney Newman. And it was when it was sold over in the BBC bought it and thought, we got to air this. Oh my God, this is amazing. Who's the guy that made this? We got to bring him over here and have him create the longest running science fiction franchise of all time. And so
that's exactly how it went down, I'm sure.
100%. 100%. As you'll
In Stephen's head.
Yeah, as you'll hear, as we talk to Paul Hayes about that and his new Doctor Who, his debut BBC audiobook, Doctor Who Starflight. So that is coming up later in the podcast. But yes, we talk about missing episodes. We are 2 weeks away, kids, 2 weeks away from being able to watch brand new to us Doctor Who that has not aired since 1965, that being episodes 1 and 3 of the Daleks Master Plan, which are, of course, their recovery was announced last week. We'll find ways to watch them. Don't worry, kids, and we'll be covering that in a couple weeks' time. But Film is Fabulous needed to put out some clarifying statements because apparently Doctor Who fans jumped to conclusions, which never happens.
No.
I can't believe it.
First time ever that it's happened. So they put out a clarifying statement, basically. Like, as I read this, which is helpful from Film is Fabulous. You're doing excellent work. And you should support them at filmisfabulous.org.uk. But I realized that, oh man, fans probably asked all these questions, didn't they? Like, are you holding any more episodes, and will you be announcing them at the screening on April 4th? No, they will not do that. That's silly. But thankfully they put that statement out. Yeah, the screening at Riverside Studios, which they announced that there was going to be a screening. And this is what happened in the last week. They announced that there was going to be a screening. We didn't know where it was yet. It was going to be at Riverside. They put tickets on sale. It crashed the website. It sold out. It sold out within seconds. You have no
sold out, and then apparently they implemented a queuing system for tickets after it sold out.
Because it happened so quickly. That's like, well, wow, that's amazing.
And at least from what I could glean, the lead time between the announcement of the event and the tickets going on sale is also pretty minimal. But still, yeah, it's sold out in like minutes or seconds or whatever.
I think seconds.
Which just goes to show how popular this is, or how much focused interest there is.
Or both? I don't know.
Or both, yeah.
How big? I have no idea how big the Riverside Studios thing is. If it's bigger than the BFI, for instance, is it like how many seats was it that sold out? But
well, the seats you can pick your seat when you buy the ticket.
Whoa!
So you could get a gauge of that, but just not from that link. You'd have to look at some other event in the same. I don't know how many screening rooms they have.
Oh, that's right. I'll go click on the also upcoming Doctor Who projections in Time, Space, and 9 that's happening on the. Oh, it's sold out too. Okay, I can't do that either. Doctor Who still old Doctor Who is still very, very popular amongst a select audience that will
to the point where they're looking back at them putting this stuff out to begin with, projected. So that's called recursion, I believe, in Time Lord science.
Yeah. It's I know. So the for those that are you already know. I'm just telling you what you're missing. Then those of you who can't go, they're screening 3 episodes. The first 3 episodes, of course, Day of Armageddon came back in 2002, 2004. Can't remember now. And then of course
4.
I want to say 4 too, because I always tell myself it's 2004, because why would episode 2 come back in 2002? That's too many 2s that I would remember that, and I don't remember it that way, you know. So I second guess myself. Anyway, they're showing episodes 1, 2, 3 screening with various panels and post and discussions there with like Gav Rymel, Toby Haydock's going to be there, Peter Purvis, all the those sorts of people. To sort of talk us through it all, us being if we were actually there. But this will coincide with the release of the episodes on BBC iPlayer, of course. I'm hoping that they aren't waiting till like whatever time of day this is happening at, 2:30 in the afternoon, which I suppose is like 5:30 for us, or 6:30 in the morning.
It'll be 7:30, but I have to forget when I guess the clocks will have changed.
Will have gone back
by then.
yeah.
So 7:30 a.m. For us.
Yeah. Well, that's fine. I can wake up at 7:30 a.m. and watch Doctor Who.
On Sunday morning.
After all, if you've done it before, do it again.
And immediately talk about it on this podcast. But should be a fun event, though. What an event. What I can't imagine the buzz of being in that room when a lot of these people are watching these things for the very first time ever, despite it being like 60 years old. You know, there's a cool aspect of that.
Kind of because of it, too, being 60 years old.
Yeah. honestly. Yeah, I know. I know the. I think we've linked them. Film is Fabulous is like put together like very short, like literally 5 to 10 second clips of restoration that they're doing, which is to show what the print looked like, which is still in pretty good condition given that it's not been played in 60 years and it's sat in a cardboard box in a film collector's attic.
Film, baby. Film.
Yeah. But then they've cleaned it up a little bit too. Gav Reimel on the Daleks 6388 put like on the thumbnail, spoilers everywhere here. We're analyzing all the clips because, of course, Gav Reimel was at the screening with Peter Purvis, so he's seen them. I'm going nowhere near any of those. I'm basically going into a vault in my mind to avoid watching any clips of these 2 episodes because I want to be surprised in full in person. So, or not in person, when I watch them. So, I don't know about you two. Are you watching any of these clips? Do you even know about them?
I've checked out the clips because who knows when this is going to come out for us in North America. Like, could be a long time coming. So I might as well just check out the clips.
Yeah.
Also, I don't have this, I don't know if emotional attachment's the right word, but you guys you're more purist than I am, I guess is the better way to put it.
That's true. Am I more of a purist than you are, Chris? What do you think?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You are definitely of the three of us.
You're the one that watches An Unearthly Child every November 23rd at
That's true.
10:16 and however many
You're more
seconds
ritualistic. And I'll just watch it, whatever. It's like, it's a clip,
true.
big deal. It's not going to kill me. So
Yeah.
But I respect others' choices.
Oh, it's awful kind.
I mean, to answer your question, Stephen, how many times have I bought Doctor Who Blu-rays or whatever?
Right.
And they've just, sat on the shelf unwatched for
That's a good point.
weeks or months afterward.
That's me with my new Criterion Network, not DVD, Blu-ray, 4K Blu-ray. I have not watched the film proper. I've watched a bit of the SD documentary from 2006,
right?
Which is a 6-part thing, which is quite good. But I have yet to watch the actual film. So shame on me.
No, I'm that way with the Doctor Who box sets too. So that's perfectly fine, Warren. And it probably will be the same when I get the season 21 set because I'd rather watch the extras than perhaps the AI resolution of the upgraded visuals that is causing some consternation and controversy across the Doctor Who fan community.
Yeah, but the same thing happened with 13, and well, we've all survived.
I suppose so. I don't know what I mean. I hope,
but at what cost?
At what cost? I saw somewhere now. I don't know if the ones on iPlayer for these 2 missing episodes will be like vid fired, or if they are waiting for that to be on the whenever this physical
Blu-ray
media really comes out.
That would make sense. Yeah. Because why do it twice?
Yeah, well, because Restore
I guess you wouldn't be doing it twice, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, a company called Restore is doing the restoration for this. It's outside of the BBC for these ones, so they aren't. I don't know if they're going through the normal process. I don't know if Peter Crocker is involved, for instance.
How AI friendly is Restore?
I don't know.
We should be asking.
I don't know.
Or are they at all? Then maybe they hate it.
I have no. I actually don't know what their attitude toward that sort of thing is, but. But based on the very few short clips that I watched before I says, no, I'm going to not watch these, I think they've done a pretty good job in a very short amount of time. They only got these back in, a few weeks ago, and we only found out about them last week, of course, but they've been working on them already. But if you listen to Tim Burrows talk about it, they were basically watching the raw film scans when they showed them in the theater, not even cleaned up yet. So and if you heard the audio of the clips that they did release, clearly that hasn't been cleaned up either. So they clearly have some work to do.
There's a certain charm that we both, I was going to say own, we don't actually own, we both are in possession of 4K 77, which is a Spanish print of proper Star Wars. And part of the charm is that it looks kind of like hell.
I didn't know it was Spanish. That's where they found it? Wow.
Yeah, that's where they found it. Somewhere in Spain or Spanish language, and then they redubbed the English back onto it. For anybody who doesn't know what we're talking about, the 3 Star Wars proper films without George Lucas screw arounds. Some fans found prints, digitized them in 4K, put the audio back into it, and here you go with the proper dialogue, like "Bring my shuttle."
Yeah.
Like in Empire Strikes Back.
It's essentially Star Wars had their own missing episodes recovery.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. Caused by management. Same thing as BBC, I guess.
Kind of way. They just erased all the prints, and you got to go find them in different countries with different languages. I didn't know they came from Spain. Exactly. I thought they came from just somewhere, like a theater or something.
I might be half remembering this right, but I vaguely remember that these were Spanish language, and they had to kind of not redubbed because the audio is already, it's not, you just have to sync it up essentially because they're speaking English to begin with, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, that's cool. I mean, I treasure those. I treasure those Star Wars.
Oh yeah, all 50 gigs each of them.
Right. Oh, and they're great. And it's people like that, people who hang on to these old films for whatever reason. I don't know what reason these people had them or not. But listen, Star Wars films, Doctor Who episodes from 1965. I mean, thank you to the film collectors of the world for basically preserving history for us, so that we could natter on about how well they are restored 60 years in time.
Just so you don't think we're a bunch of arch criminals, like when apparently Lucasfilm has said in 2027 they're going to put out in theaters the OG Star Wars, and presumably a 4K Blu-ray comes out after that. I will buy it.
Oh, 100%.
I will absolutely buy it, but I'll still treasure the crappy looking one I got. So for its own reasons,
I will also keep that. Just say okay, because how can here's the thing: when it comes to restored stuff, like okay, so here's your original print and its original mono soundtrack, and I'm going, we could do this on 5.1, couldn't we? Like, I feel like
I'm not doing that.
The one thing I'm okay with, like, I love a 5.1 mix, you know what I mean? Like, but then once you're doing that, you're thinking, oh, maybe we could just tweak this little thing, and then you're just down the rabbit hole, And then
you're doing work that Lucasfilm already did. So why are you doing that?
I know.
But for me, it's like, watching this with the film grain from it reminds me of what it probably looked like when I was a kid seeing it in 1977. So
yeah. Yeah. Well, of course, Doctor Who was never meant to be seen on film, so I do not.
Or indeed recorded at home. So
that too, very much so. But 2 weeks from today, as we record this, people will be stuffed inside the Riverside Studios watching 2 episodes of Doctor Who that none of them had ever seen unless they were really, really old. So
that's ageist.
Well, I mean, no, literally, they would be like, you have to be at least 65 to remember any of these. If
Peter Purvis, for one.
Peter Purvis saw them. He had a good seat.
Saw them two different ways.
That's
actually,
true,
because he saw it from the inside.
Yeah, I think, didn't he say that? I don't think he watched episode 3, but he watched episode 1 as it went out, I think, just to see what it was like or something. I'm not sure what his story was.
Yeah, I mean, as a young actor in the 60s in London, the last thing I'd be doing is sit at home watching Doctor Who. So.
That's true. That's a good point. I also briefly alluded to it before. There's another Riverside Studios event with a whole bunch of guests. Katie Manning, Stuart Fell, Hugh Futcher, who was Hickman in the Sea Devils, Garrick Hagan, former RFS guest, and Canadian Garrick Hagan, who was in Star Wars as Biggs Darklighter. Jeremy Bear, Susan Penhalion are all with doing a bunch of season 9 John Pertwee story screenings at Riverside Studios. And Chris says that's sold out too. That's on April 19th. Yeah, crazy.
I know it never actually happened, but I'm disappointed Stuart Fell wasn't credited as Joe Grant in Sea Devils.
And not just Alpha Centauri and
not just Sea Devil.
Yeah.
Just so she didn't swim alone.
Because there's a scene where they're climbing up or down the side of
the sea fort. Yeah.
And Joe's wearing that white pantsuit.
Yeah.
And it's Stuart Fell doing the actual climbing.
That explains a good chunk of Doctor Who fandom. I'm just saying.
Hopefully, maybe Stuart Fell and Katie Manning will wear the same outfit at this
That'd
be
event. Great.
And then Stuart could
Could you imagine?
The way that Katie's flamboyant dressed up, no, I can't actually imagine.
Well, and then they switch halfway through, so they come out and they're both dressed like an old guy. Stuart
like
Fell.
this. Except one of them's climbing up a ladder and doing backflips or something like that. I think,
probably Katie Manning. Let's be honest. She seems like more of a backflipper at this point.
Doing it, yeah.
Getting run over by a hovercraft.
Yep. Silly. So there we go. That's stuff ahead to look forward to in regards to screenings, in regard to missing episodes and all that sort of thing. Exciting time. What an exciting time to be a Doctor Who fan when the most exciting thing to happen the last, few years to Doctor Who is 2 old episodes coming back.
Yeah, well, we're one up on Star Trek where they're not making anything new right now.
It's true.
Well, actually, no. Wait a minute. Are we? Yeah, I guess we are because they are theoretically making a Christmas special, so...
Theoretically, remember when we talked about it's been bumped to September. I feel like maybe it was always supposed to be in September at this point because we're almost done through March, and I get the impression that there ain't going to be no cameras rolling in Bad Wolf Studios anytime soon. Unless of course he starts shooting on Monday. But
Paul McGann has already shot his scenes, and
True.
He sure has those AI
Billy Piper may
generated
have as
scenes.
well. And,
Yeah. I think David Tennant. No, it's too easy. It's too easy. That's no longer a joke. Plus, he's later on. He's later on in this podcast. We'll talk about David Tennant's return to Doctor
The only
Who.
thing I'll give to those fake pictures is that Billy Piper looked pretty cool in the Shooty-Gawa outfit. I'll give her that. The fake Billy Piper.
The faux Shooty-Gawa outfit. Yeah.
It did seem to work, sort of.
Yeah, I feel bad about that because there was one time I was sort of duped by AI because it was just inaccurate.
Well, you're not alone.
No,
You'll never swim alone because RTD was duped by AI earlier this week.
Man, yeah. For those that don't know, he posted one of those like, I've traveled back into the void. You know, those people like have AI photos of like taking selfies with people on the set of like Back to the Future or something like that.
Yeah.
And this AI video went back to the first days of Doctor Who on 1963, and then they're on set, and like, okay, that's a BBC camera from there, that's fine. And then later on the video, they're shooting on the TARDIS, and it looks basically like the wood panels in front of me right now, and like and all of a sudden there's like this modern camera there with like a auto cue on it. It's like what is this nonsense? Anyway,
when I watched it, I was looking at the guy going, I've traveled back in time. I'm like, is that a for real guy that did what he did in front of the green screen? Everything behind him is AI, or is the whole thing AI? I mean, it's kind of picking nits here, but
I know. Anyway, Russell G Davies shared that for a brief period, saying "amazing!" exclamation point, and then he deleted it, perhaps because many of his friends said, "What are you doing? This is terrible."
To which I say, "Amazing!" exclamation point. Him deleting it.
Yeah. So. It's infecting everywhere. Perhaps that's why we're looking forward to Doctor Who from 1965, because it predates all that.
Not ruined.
Yeah. Anyway, Christmas special should be good. Should be a lot of fun.
You bet. You betcha.
Looking forward to it. Gallifrey 1 is happening next year. Of course, tickets are on sale now. If there's a pricing tier to sort of encourage people to buy them early. Right now, they're $125 for adults, $70 for teens, up until the end of April, and they jump up $5. And after a little bit, they sort of increase after that until you get to the door. It's $150. So it pays to buy them soon. This is the penultimate edition, of course, of Gallifrey 1. So Gallifrey1.com, tickets on sale. Erica and I have barely been in the same room to buy tickets yet, so we haven't bought them yet. But
thanks to COVID and Camrose.
Yes, exactly. Snow and COVID and cameras and work and all this stuff. Yeah. Hey, do you want to talk about the BBC?
I mean, I don't see how we avoid it.
No.
So
that's fine. The BBC, according to many sources, including The Guardian, which we've quoted here, the BBC is close to hiring ex-Google chief Matt Britton as the next Director General. This, of course, to replace Tim Davie, who resigned because of the whole Trump affair.
That's right. Yes.
That's what he was there. Anyway, we mention this because he's the head of the BBC, for crying out loud. But also, and I've seen many different articles state this, which is probably why we're talking about it. He's a noted Doctor Who fan, kids. So
yeah, but nothing against this guy. I don't know anything about him. Isn't David Ellison a noted quote unquote Star Trek fan? So good luck. Well, I mean, not to equate the two. This guy could be lovely for all I know. I'm just saying I don't trust anything executives say, but when they say they love a property, I'm worried they're singling out a property. I actually watched a clip because maybe it was the only time that he's actually said that he liked Doctor Who. It was when he accepted some Royal Television Society award or something like that, like a couple of years ago. And I actually found the clip, and he says, the shows that formed me as a person, this show in particular, Doctor Who. Okay, I mean, that sounds a little more genuine than anything that comes out of David Ellison's mouth. Yeah, it's not really fair to compare the two. I'm just a little worried because I see so much terrible media stuff happening all the time. So.
I know what you mean. But the BBC isn't interested in corporate. They're not selling the BBC to Netflix or maybe they are selling.
Not
Netflix,
yet.
But yeah.
Well,
who knows?
One excerpt from the article that I'm sure Warren will love toward the end. Britain has described the rise of AI as a, quote, huge opportunity for new creative talent.
But,
God, I'm going to go crawl in a hole.
Acknowledge there is a
lot of work to do on the risks it creates.
Oh, you don't say.
Yeah. Around intellectual property and creativity. Yeah.
The whole thing, really. So.
Yeah. So there. So I mean, this isn't official, but it's being reported everywhere, so it's probably going to be official in the days to come. So it's nice to have someone at the very top of the BBC in Doctor Who's corner for future Doctor Who. So that's probably a good thing. Hey, remember the War Between the Land and the Sea, that Doctor Who spin-off that aired in December on the BBC, and then in 2026 on Disney Plus worldwide, where available? Well, it's still not on Disney Plus as of the end of April. Disney put out there, here's what's coming on in April of 2026. No War Between the Land and the Sea. Here's the thing. As we've often said, I'll keep checking this article because I feel like they might just update it like the day before they drop it all in one chunk on a Tuesday night or something when no one's looking, and fulfill their contractual obligation. Because if you're not airing it by like 4 or 5 months after its original airing in the UK, do you really care about it?
I suspect this will be it's the doldrums of streaming summer. Like it's, let's say, mid-July, and then that's when it shows up.
Yeah.
And dump it all in one go.
Yeah, based on nothing. That's just a guess, but...
Yeah, it'll be one go. Does Disney... why am I asking you two? No offense. Is the World Cup going to be on like ESPN or Disney Plus? Like,
I have no idea.
Okay.
I'll tell you where it will be. A block from me. I won't be able to escape it. So.
That's true. I'm just thinking like, and because of the World Cup, here's another thing that happens to the world. Some fish people, there you are, just take it. I don't know, like
Speaking of the World Cup, I read somewhere that NYC is not seeing the tourist bump they thought they would, and presumably other American cities are also not seeing that bump for who could say what reason?
Yeah, I'm just thinking what reason could there be for this, Warren? Do you know? Or
I don't know. No. Just because the rest of the world is wrong. That's what it is.
That's got to be it. Yeah. Why are they spending their money? It's funny that Edmonton International Airport almost reached pre-pandemic levels of flights last year, despite a massive drop in flights to the U.S. So, like everyone's flying again. They just ain't flying south. You know?
I'm going to Europe in September, so I just bought my tickets.
Oh, where are you going in Europe?
England for a weekend, and then Paris, and then Florence and Rome, and then coming home to Ottawa because I'm going to go to my CanCon thing.
Your little book thing.
Maybe I do a side trip to Montreal with friend of the show, Sarah Murphy. We'll see. And then go home.
Right. I know you've said it before, but it's just important to because, I mean, say those again. You're going to England for just a weekend, you say?
Just a weekend, yeah. Because we're going to take the train from there to Paris.
So you're just going
training around Europe to Florence and Rome, and then we're flying back from Rome.
Florence. Are you going to Paris too?
Yes, I said that.
Okay, so let me just think. Where are you taking the train? Is it near Dover Castle?
St. Pancras.
I don't know.
St. Pancras.
Or whatever the hell it is. Pancras State, whatever. The station the channel one.
St.
Thank
Pancras.
you.
St. Pancras. St.
Whatever. Fine. Chris, first of all, two things. Right. First of all, the Brits annoyingly pronounce things the wrong way.
There's no E in Pancras.
I don't care. And secondly, I pronounce everything wrong to begin with, so why are you surprised by this?
Yeah, that's fair.
Listen, St. Adric told me to do it, okay?
That's true. And the Vale Yard. It is...
and the Vale Yard.
At least you'll be there to celebrate Magna Carta Day.
That's true.
Exactly.
Happy Magna Carta Day, by the way.
And the good works of A. Nasir and his copper merchanting.
Yeah. So you're not going to Dover Castle then where they shot The Mind of Evil then?
No, I couldn't care less.
Okay. So
I literally went there in October.
I know you did. I'm looking for Warren here. So you're going to Paris? Are you going to the Eiffel Tower, Warren?
We'll go by the Eiffel Tower. I'm not going up it.
Because that's where they shot City
I know.
Death. Okay.
I know. You're insane.
And you're going to Rome too, did you say?
Yes, they didn't shoot anything there.
No, they did. They shot Fires of Pompeii in that studio. You're going to go there? Is that...
No.
Okay.
I'm going to actually see the Vatican and Roman ruins and all sorts of cool stuff. I'm not going to waste my time with tangential Doctor Who stuff. Oh, yeah. If I want to go see a Doctor Who, I can just go down to Gastown.
You could actually, yeah, that's the point. Like this is where a puddle named Eric Roberts
exactly. Out of I can go to the bench in kits that I have found.
Take a picture there next time then.
I think I did. It's somewhere in my phone. I don't know where.
Post it. I mean, people got to see it.
No, people don't care. Only you care.
I do. And I also care to make your life annoying.
Yes, well, mission accomplished.
I do that very well.
Get behind that banner.
Our friend Paul Cornell, friend of the show, former Doctor Who writer, of course, Paul Cornell, has a comic called Saucer Country. It has been optioned for a TV series under the banner of Plot Point One Productions. He's working with one of the producers of that Netflix show Lock and Key. So here's hoping Paul's also writing the pilot episode as well. So here's hoping that this, it's a long way from option to development to actually making the show, but this is the first big step in that. So congratulations, Paul.
And I don't know particular to this, I was talking to an author who wrote a book that got optioned, and he said for a couple of years he was hoping they didn't make this a TV show because him and his wife were just living off the option, and he was like, "This is great. If they never make this show, I'll be happy as hell."
Oh, wow.
I think they are actually going ahead with it now. He's a little disappointed.
Frankly. Oh, I got to actually do some work? Oh, for crying out loud. Jeez. Anyway, Deadline had the big news there. So links in the show notes if you want to read all about Paul Cornell's venture into TV. That's really exciting for him, actually. So well done. Well done, Paul. Very, very cool. We mentioned David Tennant earlier. David Tennant just cannot stay away from Doctor Who. Nope. He's returning to Big Finish for 15 brand new full cast audio episodes beginning next year. They're putting these things out. How interesting. David Tennant, just, he loves Doctor Who, and he loves doing it, and he loves doing audio Doctor Who. Kudos to that.
And he's very good at it.
He is very good.
I got his previous adventures, and they're decent.
Yeah. That's so awesome. I mean, I'm wondering, maybe they haven't recorded them yet, or they just recorded a whole bunch of them because there's a photo of Nick Briggs with David Tennant there in the studio and everything, and they're waiting till 2027 for them to come out. The timing is somewhat interesting to me. I mean, I know Big Finish loves to pre-announce things well in advance, but 2027's that's next year's 2027. That's like a year and a half away.
Yeah, but they've announced stuff that's not coming out for 3 years past when they announced it. So
that's true. I just wonder if they're looking to fill, because 2027 probably not going to be much new Doctor Who in 2027. Thinking, well, let's fill that gap by having David Tennant return in audio form for that. It's pretty cool though. I know that we sort of aren't the biggest 10th Doctor fans, but I don't think I think we appreciate and like David Tennant as a person and as an actor, and probably probably has written by other writers more so than perhaps the showrunner of the 10th Doctor era.
I don't mind him as 10 or 14, frankly. So
I love him as 14. Honestly, I like the mature approach.
I was pleasantly surprised by his approach to 14. I thought it was kind of a dumb stunt casting thing in the first place, and I still think that, but he did a good job with what he was doing. Yeah. Quite liked him as the 14th, so yeah. Anyway, he's the 10th Doctor in the audios, though, so get that 14th nonsense out of your mouth right now. It's not happening. So there you go. Very exciting news. It's always big exciting news when the BBC official Doctor Who page announces it, as well as Big Finish. So that's pretty cool news. Speaking of Big Finish, let's overanalyze some cover art. The First Doctor Adventures Beware the City of Illusions is out now. It's a First Doctor adventure with Annika Wills as Polly, of course, and other people as other characters. If this was an actual Doctor Who on TV, it would never be called Beware. It would be the City of Illusions. Right. What would it be called? As opposed to Beware. Oh, I see. Who's so on the cover? Do you see the alien on the top left there? Yeah, he looks familiar to me. And well, it's the I can't remember, the Donna Christmas, not a Christmas Invasion, the Runaway Bride. That's those spider guys. I don't know if that's what it is, but it looks like it kind of. Wrong color, but kind of similar. Rachnos, I think they're called. Yeah. But. I think actually what I think it's anyone who played Mass Effect Andromeda. I know there's 8 of you out there who played that one. Yeah, I didn't. I feel like it's those aliens that kind of remind me of the Acherons or something like that. That's what it reminded me of anyway. But anyway, that's out now from Big Finish. Also, we talked about this before, but Unit, Brave New World, Nightfall, featuring the late Marcus Gilbert's one and only Big Finish contribution is Anselin and Angela Bruce, of course, both from Battlefield. They're in that. That is out now as well. They put upon Dragon and to the right. Just this kind of like, hey guys, me too. Yeah. I'm a dragon. Please pay attention to me. Over here, come on. Yep. And lastly in the news, we kind of knew this was coming, unofficially. Once they made the first 2, you kind of know that the next 2 are coming. But Blake 7, the collection Series 3, has popped up on Amazon UK.
without a proper release date yet. But apparently you can pre-order it. So
what I love about these is that they force me to watch the last series that I own and I've been sitting on for a while. So series 2, I've not been as series 2 came out, I kind of blasted through series 1.
Right.
As series 3 comes out, I will blast through series 2.
I love series 3. Probably my favorite Blake 7 series.
I don't think I've seen it. I don't think I've seen most of it.
No, I don't think you have. No spoilers for me then, but
yeah, your favorite series is the one that stops featuring Blake.
Do they get back to the Red Dwarf? That's what I want to know.
They do, actually.
Okay, good.
In one very special episode, they get back to Red Dwarf, so it's pretty cool. Pretty cool. Anyway, so that's coming. I know that people are already probably working on it now, but it's no longer that much of a secret that these things are being made, and that is great. Not only, I was thinking about this, not only does it, it appeases the people who sort of like both Doctor Who and Blake 7, because they're kind of one and the same piece, More
or less. They feel like they're in the same universe, even if they aren't.
Right. But it also, I feel like, if missing episodes are coming back now, it's like, why rush to put out the 60 sets? Because you never know what might be in some film collector's basement. So let's maybe fill that time by making some Blake 7 sets, and that's what they're doing. So I'm all in favor of that. I think they do great work on both of them. So that will be something to look forward to. So there we go. We got a Blake 7 set. We have the season 21 set, and we have the TV movie as well, about which we'll cover in future episodes, because I've interviewed Paul Vanessis about that. But then Mavic Chen came along and kind of adjusted our schedule a little bit, so that'll go a little bit later on this podcast feed. And now this, so that's basically 3 or 4 things that have yet to show up in North America, or at least in Canada, for pre-order. So keeps you busy having all those Amazon tabs out hitting refresh every day. Or is it just me?
Yeah, it's you.
Might just be you.
Probably.
I'm going to go to Eiffel Tower and then keep hitting Amazon refresh just to fulfill those 2 streams of insanity at once.
Right. And then, of course, yell bye Duggan at the top of your...
That I will do. I mean, come on.
You got to do that, right? I bet you if you go to the Eiffel Tower, I bet you bye Duggan. I bet you there's people like locals in Paris, and here we go again.
This guy. Well, they'll give me I would be disappointed if I don't get the French.
Yeah.
Out of them.
Yeah. Oh, another English person screaming about the
Throw him off the tower.
On that note, yes. After the very short break, hey, let's talk about Flight Today. Let's talk about more old TV, except from Canada. Warning, there's some Canadian content in this podcast interview, and it's not brought up by me. It's brought up by our good friend and guest, Paul Hayes, about the 1956 CBC telemovie Flight into Danger. 70 years ago, in 1956, a CBC Live TV production called Flight into Danger made cultural ripples that are felt to this day, from eventually being remade as the famous comedy Airplane to being a key stepping stone in the career of future Doctor Who co-creator Sydney Newman. A new documentary about Flight into Danger is coming soon to BBC Sounds, and to talk about this and about his debut Doctor Who BBC audiobook is the producer of that documentary, the returning guest, Paul Hayes. Hello, Paul.
Hello, thank you very much for having me on, Stephen. Yeah, this is my 3rd time. So in the future, when there's a future podcast about Radio Free Skaro, that means I get a miniscope, I think, doesn't it?
You do get a miniscope. Yes, for those that don't know, Paul has also written the wonderful books, Pull to Open, about the gestation of Doctor Who back in the early 60s, and the excellent The Long Game, about the return of... So perhaps there's a 3rd book in you about the return of Doctor Who, or the death of Doctor Who, or something to cover this.
Well, I don't know. I mean, there is... I do have a book coming from Telos later this year, which is sort of Doctor Who adjacent, but perhaps we'll come on to that later, maybe.
Okay, I will ask you about that, but let's start with the focus of your documentary, Flight into Danger, which was broadcast live on the CBC here in Canada on April 3rd, 1956. It starred one James Doohan, of course, who would go on to be in Star Trek. Also had Cease Linder, for all of you Quatermass and the Pit fans. He's in there as well.
Or James Bond fans.
Yes, that too. And also the father of Michael Ontkeen, who would, of course, be famous for Sheriff Harry Truman in Twin Peaks. But that's neither here nor there. The production was overseen by Sydney Newman, of course, who went on to co-create Doctor Who. It's the 70th anniversary of that original broadcast. What compelled you to do a documentary about it?
Well, it's something I've been fascinated by for a long time. I can't remember where I first heard of it. I have a suspicion I may have first read about it in Adrian Rigelsford's The Doctor's book, because it's mentioned in there. That may be where I first heard of it. But when I wrote my book, Pull to Open, about the creation of Doctor Who, one of the things that became clear when I wrote the chapter about Sydney Newman's life was that Flight into Danger was a real key feature of his life and a real important stepping stone in his career, because it was what really eventually led to him coming to the UK, because Flight into Danger, leaping ahead a little bit in the story, it was shown by the BBC, a recording was shown by the BBC a few months after the Canadian showing, and it was a really big hit in the UK. It really made a big splash. Lots of newspapers using it to sort of beat the BBC with saying, why can't the BBC do anything as good as this? You know, the Canadians have shown us how to do it. And so the BBC bought more CBC plays, and at the end of all of them was this big credit, supervising producer Sydney Newman. He came over for a visit to Britain in 1957 and was sort of tapped up by ABC Television to come and work over here, and obviously eventually then moved to the BBC. So it's one, I know there are all kinds of sort of moments you can point to in history saying Doctor Who began here, but this is Flight into Danger is one of those moments. So when I was writing my book Pull to Open, I thought, I know it's not vital to the story of this book, but I really want to see this. It's such an important piece of television history, and it doesn't really seem to exist anywhere. So I wrote to the CBC archives, really firstly just to see if it existed, and it did. And so I wanted to know, well, could I buy a copy for research purposes? And God bless the CBC for $300 even though I was a British person buying something from a Canadian organisation, it had to be done in US dollars for some reason. I don't know, maybe that's how they do their external payment. But anyway, so for $300 they sold me a copy purely for my own personal use of Flight into Danger, which was absolutely brilliant.
And well, what did you? I mean, it's live TV of those days. I mean, what did you think of the live TV production from Canada?
Well, obviously, as someone who's very interested in television history and very interested in Doctor Who and Doctor Who's early days, seeing a sort of multicam studio drama in black and white, it's not alien to us, is it? Mm-hmm. We're well used to that sort of production standard, and I think it holds up very well indeed. I mean, we should say this was not a cheap drama. Average cost of the series it was in was General Motors Theatre. That was the CBC's big flagship drama series. As with it was with most of the English-speaking television world at the time, the main thing at the time was plays. Obviously, in the US, in Britain, in Canada, it was the live one-off single play was the main kind of TV thing at the time. Series came to dominate not long afterwards, but plays were the main thing. And Canada's main one, the CBC's main one, was General Motors Theatre, sponsored obviously once a week on Tuesday evenings, 8 p.m. They would have a 1-hour drama, a different thing every week, sometimes an adaptation of a stage play, or perhaps a TV play for a script from Britain or the US. But particularly once Sydney Newman started running it in 1954, much more often original Canadian content, as you might say. Although Flight into Danger was written by an immigrant to Canada, Arthur Haley from Luton in England, so it was their main sort of flagship drama, and the average cost of a General Motors Theatre episode was about 14,000 Canadian dollars an episode at the time. They spent 18,000 on Flight into Danger. They had a lot of pre-filming, which was very unusual for this series for the time. They went out to a couple of the nearby airports to Toronto and shot footage, and they actually got into a little Cessna plane and shot footage of one of these big planes going around in the sky, special footage, and the undercarriages coming down, all this kind of thing. It's a Canadair North Star, the plane that the play set on. And they actually got, because they realised it was going to be very expensive to build the cockpit set, David Green, the director, also a British expat, he was from Manchester, he managed to arrange to get a cockpit from a decommissioned North Star, and because it was a sort of wide load, they got a police escort to take it through Toronto to Jarvis Street, where the CBC studios were, to get it into the studio. So it's like with Doctor Who, people think of Doctor Who as being cheap, but actually, particularly early on in the early 60s, it had a decent budget for what it was. And this same with Flight into Danger. You might look at it, people might look at it now and think, well, it's a very cheap sort of live TV drama, but it was not cheap at the time. It was, there was a lot of money and effort put into this.
Yeah, it's if it's black and white, it's multicam, it's videotape.
Well, it's live, not even videotape. It was live.
But it has that look to it, as watchers of 1960s Doctor Who would do. But of course, with Canadian accents and mentions of Vancouver and the Canadian Football League and everything else. It's that's what was so fascinating to me when I watched it.
The accents are a really interesting thing, actually. There's a report in the Toronto Star from when the news came that it had been sold to Britain, and BBC BBC were going to show it. And there's this little piece in the Toronto Star where they say, the British may be puzzled by the non-Canadian accents. Plot is set in Canada, but everybody seems to speak in the accents of Cambridge.
Is it really Cambridge? I thought
I mean, there's a character who's sort of clearly Northern English. He's from like the north of England,
right?
He's like one of the passenger characters. But obviously Doohan's pure Canadian, and I mean, as an ignorant Briton,
right.
I thought everyone. Although actually, I should say one of the great things about doing this documentary is that I found out that the co-star who has second billing under Doohan, Corin Conley, still alive at the age of 96.
Wow.
And I found on YouTube that there was a thing she'd done, a sort of poetry reading in a little sort of with an organisation she's involved with where she lives now in California. And that was only done a few months ago. So I thought, she's still around and engaged with life. And so I emailed the producer who'd done this poetry reading with her, and they arranged for me to interview her over Zoom. So I've got one of the stars of the documentary, Corin Conley, in the documentary. And the reason I mention it connected with accents is because she was American. She's from Virginia. But she'd moved to Canada in the early 50s and done a lot of acting with sort of Lorne Green's School of Actors in Montreal and Toronto, and a lot of radio acting for the CBC, and then done a lot of television acting for the CBC. And so me being an ignorant Brit, one of the things I asked her was, obviously, because like most British people, unless it's like a deep South US accent or a Brooklyn accent or something, I can't tell. With that kind of Hollywood American accent, I can't tell if someone's American or Canadian. So I said to her, when you were doing these roles on Canadian television, did you have to put on, a Canadian accent? And she said to me, no, not really. Although she did say, I did feel that in one of the lines early on, I do think I sound very Southern, she said. I think she means the bit at the ticket desk when she's sort of teasing the ticket clerk at the beginning, and he's sort of flirting with her. And she says, yeah, maybe we'll go away together. We'll arrange it with your wife. So I think that's the bit where she says she sounds quite Southern, but she's clearly meant to be a Canadian character. It's a bit where Doohan's character sort of sarcastically refers to her as Miss Canada at one point. So she is meant to be Canadian. But I think you have seen it, haven't you? So did she stand out to you as a Virginian, or did she feel Canadian?
I have to admit, I didn't. I was more fascinated by the CFL talk when during that early conversation. It's like we've recently lost a couple of notable Canadians in recent years, like Gordon Pinsent and Gordon Lightfoot. All of our Gordons are gone. And hearing like archive interviews of Sydney Newman, like that Eastern Canadian accent of a certain age is different to how we speak now. In a way, to my ears
like
anyway.
How that sort of plummy BBC voice doesn't really exist here anymore.
A little bit. It's kind of like that, and you kind of get that when you hear like people who grew up in the 40s and 50s, perhaps in Ontario, especially. It might be different out west. So it was just kind of like charming to hear that Canadian brogue. I don't know, for lack of a better word, but I never noticed the American in it. But
there is another nice accent one I can give you as well, because a few months in September 56, the BBC showed the original Canadian recording, but the NBC in America, they didn't fancy that. They made their own version in the Alcoa, although they used the CBC's film inserts. There's a bit in Sydney Newman's memoirs where he talks about, they asked him if they could use the inserts rather than the film inserts, rather than making their own ones of planes and things. And apparently David Green, the director, was a bit miffed that Newman just said, yeah, that was fine, without even consulting him. But there's a review in, which paper's this? Let me have a look. Hang on. This is The Province. Right. I think it might be Vancouver paper.
Vancouver Province, yep.
Yeah. And it's a little verdict on the American version of Flight into Danger. And it says, strange what Americans think of Canadians. On Flight into Danger, the Canadian play produced by a US cast from New York, there were a French-Canadian co-pilot, a British pilot, an Irish doctor, and assorted Empire accents everywhere. Only 3 of the cast talked as Canadians know they talk. So they didn't like the American version having all kinds of accents from across the Commonwealth in it.
I'm amazed that the Americans would actually still set it in Canada. I would assume that they would turn it into American and cross American Flight and change all the CFL stuff to like the Green Bay Packers or something.
I thought of that because the movie version, which plays a big part, 0 Hour, that's also an American production, but it is also set in Canada. And I thought, when I saw 0 Hour, I thought maybe the thing is, if you're doing a long cross-country flight across the US, I think you've probably got many more options of where you can land, haven't you? So there's not going to be as long a tension on the flight. Whereas I'm guessing with Canada, if you don't know the story, basically it's a specially chartered flight from Toronto to take some fans to the Grey Cup in Vancouver. I think it was topical at the time because I think in 55, I think it was the first time the Grey Cup, what we call the final over here in Britain, had ever been held in Western Canada, I think. I think that's right.
Quite probably,
So it's kind of a topical thing. It's a specially chartered plane, and it goes from Toronto, has a stopover in Winnipeg, where James Doohan gets on as George Spencer. He gets the last seat on the plane, and then it goes over the mountains, but Calgary's fogged in, so it has to land in Vancouver. But I was thinking, you've probably got, if you're going across the continental United States, you've probably got loads more options of where you could land, so it would maybe be a shorter flight. But that was my thinking, anyway, of why maybe they kept it in Canada.
That's probably true. They certainly wouldn't have come to Edmonton, apparently. We just missed our claim to fame for being involved in that, but yeah. So anyway, I mean, obviously this gets made as Airplane, somewhat famously down the line.
Yes.
But the Sydney Newman angle, of course, is the big one for Doctor Who fans because you've already slightly explained it there, but basically the BBC saw this. We're impressed. We're impressed by Sydney Newman, and was it as commonplace as it seems to be that Canadians could basically just have freedom of movement between Canada and the UK because of what, Commonwealth laws or something like that?
This is the thing. At the time, it changed sometime in the 60s, I think, but at the time in the 1950s, if you were a citizen of a Commonwealth country, any Commonwealth country, you had full British citizenship rights. So this was something that I hadn't understood until I wrote Pull to Open, because I was confused by the way so many Canadians came to the UK in the 50s. I thought, okay, it makes sense they would want to go somewhere where there's a bigger television industry to move into. But why wouldn't they go and work in the States? That's a much bigger television industry. But of course, because they were Commonwealth citizens, they could come and live and work in the UK with no restrictions whatsoever. Whereas I believe it was, and perhaps still is, much more difficult for a Canadian to go and live and work in the US. So it was much easier for them to come over to the UK and work.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of like actors like Robert Beatty and Bruce Boa, who show up at everything in the UK often as Americans. Probably had the same sort of path there, but of course Sydney Newman wasn't plucked by the BBC. He actually went to ATV or ABC rather first.
ABC, yeah. But the interesting thing about the BBC showing, it's worth talking about, is that they'd originally going to make their own version. In fact, before Flight into Danger even went out in Canada, the writer Arthur Haley. Well, let's talk a little bit about Arthur Haley. He's very interesting. He'd grown up in Britain. He'd served in the RAF during the Second World War. And he didn't like the way Britain was going after the Second World War. He didn't think there was much future in Britain. So he'd done his flying training in the RAF in Canada during the war. So he moved to Canada and immigrated to Canada. And he worked in the trucking industry as a magazine editor and advertising man. And he'd been on a business trip to Western Canada. And he was flying back on this big 4-engine plane. And while he was sitting on this plane, he idly wondered to himself, you know, he'd been a pilot, but not for a decade. He hadn't flown anything for a decade, and he'd only flown smaller planes. And he thought, wow, what would happen if something happened to the pilots? Would I be able to land this big 4-engine plane? Could I be the hero? Could I get it down on the ground? And when he got home, he said to his wife, Sheila, you know, I've had this brilliant idea for a story, and he wrote it as a play. He called it Flight 714, which remains the flight number of the plane. He never did find out who recalled it Flight into Danger, but it's Flight 714 when he named it. And he sent it to the NBC in America. They weren't interested. So then he sent it to the CBC, and it eventually landed up on Sydney Newman's desk, and they made it for General Motors Theatre. But yeah, and Haley, of course, went on to become a very famous writer. He wrote for television for a while. There's an interview I found with him from the 70s with the BBC where he says basically he lost interest in television when the days of live drama came to an end towards the end of the 50s. He found live drama really exciting, and he wasn't that engaged when it went onto tape and film. So he started chuck it all in and settle for novel writing and merely being a multi-millionaire best-selling novelist. So he settled that. You know, he wrote very famous novels like Airport and Hotel and things like that. I mentioned how I interviewed Corinne Connolly for the piece, and she said that when the actors first heard who'd written this script, she said they were all scoffing because the only thing they knew Arthur Haley from, so he was the guy who wrote the truck commercials, and they were all, there's this great quote she gives me in the interview where she says, so we were all scoffing, saying Arthur, who writes the truck commercials, is writing a drama, and they were very doubtful about this, but it became possibly even sort of pound for pound, maybe the biggest, most successful drama Canadian television's ever had, maybe.
Impressive. I'm I'm compelled to point out that the Flight 714 sounded very familiar, and it is indeed was the title of one of the later Tintin comics. Actually, was called Flight 714.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, that is interesting, isn't it? I don't know if that's a coincidence or not, but
I don't know. It came out many years afterwards. It was sort of like it was originally Flight 714 to Sydney, but then shortened to Flight 714, which is what I remember when I read Tintin as a kid. It's all coming together at this point.
Maybe Haley and Herge both thought about it. So like Douglas Adams and John Lloyd deciding 42 was the funniest number. Maybe they decided 714 was the most dramatic number.
It could be. Well, let's talk about the Sydney Newman aspect, because of course, he leaves. How soon after Flight to Danger does he leave the CBC to move to the UK?
Yeah, well, so basically, I was sort of saying, wasn't I, about the BBC version? So I'll do a little quick recap of that first. Newman he actually sent the script to the BBC before the CBC version had even gone out. He had a friend who worked for the BBC, Arthur Haley, and he sent the script to the BBC. BBC really liked it. They were going to do their own version. They were going to get Alvin Rakoff, the future Mr. Jacqueline Hill, who was a Canadian, one of the Canadians who had already gone over there. He was going to direct a version for the BBC. But in the end, the CBC sent them a copy of the film recording, the kinescope, as a sort of guide, a production guide. But they were so impressed with it. And we know this because the head of drama at the BBC at the time, Michael Barry, he did a live introduction to the showing of this. And he said, we were so impressed with this recording we were sent, we decided not to do our own version, and we thought we'd show this. So that was a big hit. Gets an appreciation index of 92, which is a record for a drama, and a quarter of the UK population watches. It beats the ITV stations that are active in the ITV areas, and so they buy more Canadian plays. And then, in the summer of '57, Newman comes over to as a guest of the BBC to come to Britain to watch some theatre plays, to see how television is made here. And at the end of that trip in the summer of '57, he has to be invited to a clandestine meeting with ABC, and they ask him to come over, and he comes over in the spring of '58. So it's almost exactly 2 years after Flight into Danger is when Newman comes over, and the whole ball gets rolling on that part of his career.
That's amazing that a little Canadian thing becomes that. Of course, the James Doohan aspect of thing for Star Trek fans. There's an early starring role for him. Of course, he goes south.
Yeah, it's one of his first. I mean, I've been doing a lot of research into the play because I've got this terrible feeling I'm going to have to write a book about Flight, because there's so much. Because the documentary is only quite short, it's only 20 minutes.
Yeah,
and there's so much interesting stuff about it. I think the next non-fiction book might have to be about Flight into Danger, which I'm sort of cautious about because I don't know if I'm really qualified to write about something Canadian. I mean, in theory, it should be no more different to writing about British television in the 1950s, because that's kind of equally alien to me in a way. But somehow you feel more, even if it's long in the past, you feel kind of more comfortable writing about something in your own country. Like, I didn't even know. You mentioned the CFL teams. Until I looked at it, I didn't even know if the Blue Bombers was a real team or something Arthur Haley had made up for the thing. I can't remember the other team that gets mentioned in it, but that is a real team as well.
Well, I will tell you this: that back in those days, there was a team called the Rough Riders, and there was also a team called the Rough Riders. There were two teams called the Rough Riders in the CFL. It was great. So there's your first Canadian lesson. Well, listen, we talked about this briefly before we started the call. Is that there's so little archive television from the CBC that's available for streaming or anything. We're as qualified as you are, quite frankly, to talk about the early days of Canadian TV, because neither of us have seen any of it.
Yeah, we are lucky that Flight into Danger exists. Obviously, all of the General Motors Theatres plays were what Doctor Who fans call tele-recorded, film recorded or kinescoped, as you'd say over there, because obviously, as you may not know this, Canada is a very big place.
Very large.
And it has several time zones and a lot of area to cover. And actually, when we say that Flight into Danger was shown on the 3rd of April, 1956, it was shown in Ontario on the 3rd of April 1956. It was shown on all the stations that were then had a microwave link to the Toronto station, which was about 11 of the stations at the time, all the English stations that had a microwave link to Toronto. And the only, at the time it was shown, the only English station that had a live link to Toronto that wasn't in Ontario was the Montreal English station. So it was shown in most of the Ontario stations and the Montreal English station. And then over the next 2 or 3 weeks, most of the stations were on a kind of 3-week delay. A couple of them were on a 2-week. Vancouver showed it 2 weeks later. Winnipeg showed it 2 weeks later. And most of the other stations showed it 3 weeks later. So that was the kind of typical delay. And actually, it's interesting. If you look on you can look up the CBC archives online on their website, and the copy, the listing for their copy of Flight into Danger is listed as being Vancouver from the 17th of April. So I wonder if maybe, without having access to the archives and the documents, if maybe the Toronto kinescope maybe wasn't kept, and maybe the Vancouver copy was kept maybe, and that was the one that eventually made it back into the central CBC archive. So these things can be very fragile. I did read one article, though, that said that at the time, the CBC typically made about sort of 20 copies of each live programme to go out to the various stations. They had about, at the time of Flight into Danger, they had, I think, 37 stations. 31 English and 6 French. And as I say, there were about 11 of them linked up on the Toronto live kind of circuit, and the rest of them would have to get kinescopes on a sort of 2 or 3 week delay.
Are we going to have to do some research on bicycling prints of
bicycling chains? Yeah.
It's all missing episodes of bicycle chains and 16 mil film reels on this podcast.
But it does feel. I mean, you would know far more about this than I do. But obviously, anywhere in the world, interest in archive television is a very niche subject.
Yes.
But it does feel as if in America, there's a kind of micro industry which supports an interest in it, and in Britain, there's a kind of obviously very active micro industry that supports an interest in it. And I just as an outsider, it doesn't feel as if that same kind of archive TV ecosystem necessarily exists in Canada. I don't know what your view on that would be.
No, I think you're right, and it's lamentable really, because I know that they, like, some shows like I can't remember the name of there's a TV show starring John Vernon that I can't remember. He's in this. He's in Flight into Danger.
Yes, he's sort of sitting behind Cease Linder all the time, isn't he?
Yeah, he's sort of famous. Yeah,
it's the one about it's the sort of Quincy type one, isn't it? It's the one about the pathologist.
It is.
I can't remember its name.
Yeah, John Vernon was famous for Porky's or something like that. Animal House, that's what it was. Anyway, he was. I'm literally looking up the name of the.
But he played a sort of Quincy type sort of police pathologist, didn't he? I think. And it was a big hit series from the 60s, and I think came back in the 90s.
It was called Wojak. And like they showed that repeats on on a TV station called Showcase back in like the 90s and stuff like that. And if you ever search for it online, you can't find it anywhere on YouTube, and you can like maybe find a very low res copy of the opening titles with like maybe the Showcase bug on it. But that's it. Like, it was a very big show back in its day, and it's absolutely nowhere to be found. Like, be it DVD, be it VHS, be it anything. So, I'd be interested in knowing what the Canadian, are there film collectors in Canada? Do they have like random 16 millimeter cans of like Wojak original broadcast
film
episodes?
Is Fabulous Canada. Yeah,
Right.
There is one General Motors theatre that has escaped onto YouTube. The Shatner fans got hold of it, because obviously not only was Doohan doing a lot of CBC work at this time, Shatner was doing a lot of William Shatner was doing a lot of CBC work at this time. And I think there are interviews, aren't there, where James Doohan is very disparaging about William Shatner's acting abilities in the CBC days. I think they were old kind of rivals from the CBC days, weren't they? But there's an adaptation of Billy Budd from General Motors Theatre from '55, which it's got Patrick Macnee in it, I think, and Basil Rathbone. And that one's nice because it's got all the General Motors kind of breaks and intros and stuff in it. So it gives you an idea of like how it went out. But that's the only one I know of that's escaped. I mentioned how I spoke to Corinne Connolly, the co-star of this, for the piece, and she did a lot of work. She'd worked with William Shatner in radio drama in Montreal, and I was a bit naughty. I kind of asked, because I knew that Doohan had slagged off Shatner a lot. I asked her, how would you compare the two of them as actors? She was very diplomatic about that, but she said, a lot of actors, we'd have a starring role one week, and then we'd do a little bit part the next week, because there were so many of these live dramas being made. And she said to me, sadly this isn't true, but it'd be wonderful if it was. She said, I'm not sure. I think Bill might have been on the plane. I think Bill might have been one of the people on the plane. He's not, sadly, but wouldn't that have been wonderful if he was just sort of sitting there in one of those seats?
Yeah, in the background as a background artist.
Of course, we do know that if he had been on that plane, he would have been preoccupied with the monster sitting on the wing.
Twilight Zone reference for all of you out there. I mean, this is, it's a very Canadian story, which obviously appeals to us. So thank you for upping our Canadian content on this podcast. But it's also a British story with Sydney Newman and a Universal story with the remaking of Airplane. For
those who don't know, we should say, shouldn't we, that eventually it was remade lots of times. There was the US TV version, which we've mentioned. There was an Australian TV version in the 60s. There was a German TV version in the 60s. That's on YouTube. Wow. If you speak German and want to go and enjoy that. There was a novelization. There was a stage play version that got on quite a bit in Canada. There was an American TV movie version in the early 70s called Terror in the Sky, which Arthur Haley, the writer, hated so much he took out full-page newspaper ads disassociating himself from.
Wow.
But there was a movie version done in 57, so the year after the TV version. It's called 0 Hour. Arthur Haley went to Hollywood to write the script for it. They rewrote it, so but his whole structure and lots of his dialogue survives. And so this film version, 0 Hour, 20 years later, a late night showing on American television, got seen by the writer-director team of Jim Abrahams, Jerry Zucker and David Zucker. They'd been recording these late-night showings of films just to get the adverts, because they did sort of Mickey takes of adverts. Mm-hmm. And they loved this so much. Originally, they thought they could do a redubbed comedy version, but then they decided, let's just do a remake, and they did the film Airplane. And it's fascinating how, because a lot of the dialogue from Flight into Danger survives into 0 Hour, it then survives into Airplane. There are lines in Flight into Danger that go all the way through to Airplane. There's like... I may bend your precious airplane, but I'll land it. Although I think Doohan does say aeroplane. I think that was still surviving in Canadian then.
Yeah.
There's it handles like a wet sponge. That's in Flight and in Airplane. And one of the famous bits in Airplane where the doctor tells him he's going to have to fly the plane, and because he flew before in the war, and Doohan says the line. He says it's a completely different type of flying altogether. So that one goes all the way through. Actually, the language thing is interesting, because one thing that surprised me was with the aeroplane surprised me, because I wouldn't have expected that. But I didn't realise that kind of bloody survived into Canadian English. I thought it just survived in Australian English as well as obviously British English. But Cease Linder gets a bloody at the end. He said, of course he can't fly the bloody thing. And I thought, well, maybe that's just Arthur Haley being a British writer accidentally putting that in. But he'd been living in Canada for 7 years by then. And you think if it had seemed odd, they would have taken out in rehearsals. So I can only imagine that obviously bloody still had... Well, I interviewed Graham Burke, is the Canadian TV history expert, is one of the people who I interview in the programme. And I said to him in the interview that maybe bloody still survived in Canadian English then. And he assured me that apparently bloody still survives in Canadian English to this day, apparently, which I wasn't aware of.
Well, not enough for me to not get admonished for saying it in class in elementary school, as I recall. I think I'd heard it somewhere, and so I said bloody thing. Don't you dare say that. So it was a mild swear, apparently, but I can confirm that it was still something that was in the common parlance. How did you for BBC Sounds, this is an excellent documentary, but it's not exactly British focused. So how did you sort of sell BBC Sounds on producing this for you?
Well, because I'd seen it a few years ago when I was writing Pull to Open, and then I realised towards the end of last year that the anniversary was coming up. And I thought, I really want to do something about this. So I started looking into it. And when I found out that Corinne Connolly was still alive, I without wishing to sound disrespectful, for obvious reasons, I arranged to record an interview with her as soon as I could. And I just thought, I can do something. I thought I can get something out on this, even if it just ends up being a little package, a little item. Somewhere I can get something out on this. And so I started interviewing people. I was amazed. I got David Zucker, the co-director of Airplane. He very kindly spoke to me. And as I said, Graham Burke spoke to me. And there's a film and TV expert called Melanie Williams who I speak to. And I thought we should do a little bit on the reality of that. So I spoke to a pilot called Emma Henderson as well for the whole thing about, the realities of whether this could happen. And put it all together. And it sounds very self-indulgent. If anyone's listening and worried about how their BBC licence fees have been spent, I should say, although I sort of commissioned myself to make this programme, I just decided I was doing it. No licence fee money was harmed in the making of this programme. I did it all either in my own time or, around other duties, so no licence fee payers' money was harmed. But, No, I got lucky in the sense I was trying to find a hook to. I tried to get the World Service interested. The World Service, very nice to me, the lady at the World Service, but she didn't think it was quite right for them, and various other things I tried. But so then I thought, well, maybe I can hang it on where Arthur Haley came from. So I hadn't looked up where he came from, the writer, and he came from a place called Luton, which, without wishing to drill down into lots of boring details for everyone, the part of the BBC where I work, in a place called Norwich, is part of the BBC East region. And Luton is also in the BBC East region, right over on the other side of it. But because it's kind of in the region, I kind of knew people there and could. So I said to them, if I sort of hang it on Arthur Haley's Luton link, could I make a documentary to go up on your section of BBC Sounds? For those who don't know, BBC Sounds is the sort of the radio version of the iPlayer. It's the BBC's kind of audio streaming service, and listen again service and all that kind of thing. And they said, yeah. So what actually happened is I made an edit of the program and then I gave it to them and I said, would you like to run this? And they were like, well, this is free content. Yeah, of course we'll run this. So, but it is kind of nice to know that the BBC is still a place where you can be interested in something and you can think it will interest other people and you can make a program without anybody actually commissioning you to do it at any stage.
I know. Everyone in the UK sort of complains about the BBC and also loves and defends the BBC with their entire life, and often both at the same time. I like to. There's a famous quip by Winston Churchill about democracy that I like to adapt for the BBC. And it's the BBC is the worst possible broadcasting organisation apart from all the others. Exactly. I also amend that to airlines because whenever says, "Oh, I hate flying this particular airline," it says, "No, you just hate the airline industry. It's all bad." But it's the only way to. But I was very lucky. I realise I'm in a very all seriousness. I'm in a very privileged position to be able to, decide and things like getting David Zucker to speak to me. There is you can still those three letters still have that little bit of magic to them. That's true. That
you can still sort of flutter your eyelashes at someone and say, "Oh, I'm from the BBC," and they will speak to you, and you sort of want to say, "Really? You're actually going to speak to me for this?" I've been very lucky to be able to. I know it does sound indulgent just deciding you're going to make a program about this, but I do think it's something that will interest people, especially with that link to Airplane and it being the original version of Airplane. Everyone I've sort of spoken to about this has said, "Oh, I never knew that," and been kind of interested in that kind of Airplane link. So hopefully that will grab a few people's attention.
Mm-hmm. I know you've said to me privately that you wish you could have made it longer than 20 minutes. Is there
an hour easily?
Is there a director's cut in the offing, perhaps?
Well, I was thinking maybe after sufficient time's gone by, maybe I could do a sort of longer cut and put it out there somewhere. But yeah, I could. That's one of the reasons why I think I might have to just sit down. Well, I've sort of kind of already started doing the research for it. I might have to just do, the story of Flight into Danger as a book, because there's so much more you could say, so much, and so many interesting things you could say, like we've spoken about. The story of Canadian television drama in the 1950s isn't one that's really told, and I think it should be, because the CBC had such a kind of thriving industry. I mean, one of the things you do find when you look at the newspapers at the time, that they do get a lot of stick from the Canadian press at the time. And that's one of the reasons why Flight into Danger is so praised, because a lot of the Canadian newspapers at the time are it's almost kind of, wow, the CBC's finally made something really good. And so there is a bit of that you kind of get at the time. But those kind of stories you can tell about the individuals involved and Canadian television, how I find that whole thing really fascinating about, because it's a television industry and a television history that I hadn't really explored and didn't really know about. It is a kind of cross between the British television industry and the American television industry, where you have this public broadcaster, but they have commercial affiliates and all this kind of thing, sponsored programs. And so I think there's all kinds of interesting stories you could tell about this. So yeah, I could easily have done an hour's documentary, but hopefully the 20 minutes that we have got in this program is enough to at least give people some idea of the story of Flight into Danger, which has been a story that's very much been obliterated really by the success of Airplane. One of the things I asked David Zucker was, because Flight into Danger had been remade several times before Airplane, and then after Airplane it all just stops. It stops dead. And so I said, do you think it would be possible to ever do a serious version? And he said, he's like, no, I don't. You could never do this story seriously again. Although the film and TV expert I spoke to, a film and TV lecturer at the local university where I live here in Norwich, Melanie Williams, who I spoke to for the programme, she thought you could maybe do it as a period, but if you did it as a fifth, well, it'd be difficult to do it now because obviously cockpit security is so much more different now.
Yeah.
But you could maybe do it as a 50s period piece, and maybe that would be the way that you could maybe one day do another remake. So she thought it was maybe possible, but I don't know. It's interesting that sort of up to Airplane, it seemed to retain a kind of common currency in Canada, the story. Like there's an advert, full page advert I've seen in one of the papers, or maybe in Maclean's, where it's for their 25th anniversary of CBC TV in 1977, and they've got this list of all the great programs they've bought Canada down the years, and there's 77 right at the top of this list is Flight into Danger.
Wow.
And they repeated it for the 30th anniversary of their TV service in 1982, which is one of the reasons I'm amazed it's never sort of escaped onto YouTube, because I thought maybe that 82 showing might have been recorded by someone, but seemingly not. And but yeah, after Airplane, it seems to have very quickly kind of been blotted out of history by the success of Airplane.
Well, I look forward to everyone listening to the audio documentary coming up sometime in early April, I imagine, around
it'll be out, for the anniversary 3rd of April. It'll definitely be out for then. I think it'll probably be online a couple of days before that. But we'll be. I'll make sure it's sort of out there on social media and things when it's up. Yeah,
do so, and perhaps to while away the time before a certain couple of Doctor Who episodes show up on iPlayer on the Easter weekend.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, what a weekend!
What a weekend! Speaking of William Hartnell stuff, we had Michael Stevens of BBC Audiobooks on the show a while back, and he just casually mentioned that there was an upcoming at the time audio drama by one Paul Hayes called Doctor Who Starflight. It's your first ever audio drama. How did this all come about, Paul?
It's my first ever professional work of fiction, and it's
wow.
all I've ever wanted to be since I was little is a writer. And as I've grown older, it's sadly I've turned. I'm pretty decent at writing non-fiction, but I find fiction very difficult to get right and very difficult to do a good job on. So although I've had some books published in non-fiction, I've always wanted to write fiction, and this has had quite a long gestation. It's all started back at the 60th anniversary of Doctor Who, when a man called Robert Seater, who was then in charge of BBC History, he asked the BBC Written Archive Centre at Caversham in Berkshire to recommend someone to write them the 60th anniversary Doctor Who article for the history of the BBC website. And they very kindly recommended me, so I did that article for him. And then off the back of that, he invited me to speak at a BBC staff event for the Doctor Who 60th anniversary, a broadcasting house in London, which was amazing. I thought, what the hell am I doing here? Because there was Rebecca Ferguson, who was the drama commissioning editor. There was Vanessa Hamilton, who's the Doctor Who brand director. There was Tyrell Charles, who presenter of the Doctor Who podcast, and me sitting on it. I was like, what am I doing here? This is ludicrous. But I don't know how I knew it was him. I can't remember. But one of the people at that event was Michael Stevens, and he asked a question in the Q&A. I can't remember if he introduced himself or maybe someone pointed it out to me and said, oh, that's Michael Stevens who does the audiobooks. But he mentioned in this question how he'd read my book Pull to Open and enjoyed it. And as someone who'd always wanted to write fiction, I thought, well, I've got to take advantage of this summer. So after the event, I sent him an email saying, hi, Michael, really pleased that you like Pull to Open. Could I just pitch you some ideas for Doctor Who stories? And much to my amazement, he said, yeah, send us some ideas. So I sent a few ideas in, and he and John Ainsworth, who sort of edits the range with him, they liked this particular one that I'd come up with. So I did a storyline for that, and then it got commissioned, which is just, for many reasons, one of the most amazing things that's ever happened to me in my life. One thing that really just sort of had me sitting there grinning to myself is when I got the contract, it comes through from the BBC, because it's BBC Audiobooks, like, this is a commission for your Doctor Who script. And it's like, because it's an audiobook, they refer to it as a script.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is the BBC, and it's like, it's exactly the way you always used to read about it in the behind the scenes stuff. It's like, you get half payment now and half payment on delivery. It's like, I felt like I was, David Fisher in 1978 or something. It's like I'm actually writing Doctor Who. This is ludicrous. But it was absolutely amazing. And it ties in with what we've been speaking about, because it was commissioned, I came up with the idea not long after the 60th anniversary, when I'd been writing about the origins of Doctor Who in my book Pull to Open. Flight into Danger had been in my head, and this particular storyline, Starflight, The storyline isn't similar to Flight into Danger in any way, but the setting is, because it's set on a kind of space version of an airliner. It's set on an interstellar kind of airliner, if you will, and that was a conscious kind of thing, that kind of setting. Thinking, well, this is one of the points where Doctor Who began on an airliner, so this story idea can be on a kind of space out. As I say, the actual stories aren't similar, but it did germinate from that Flight into Danger influence.
Yeah, and it's William Hartnell and that opening TARDIS team, sort of like, I think you told me it was like sort of set in between season 1 and 2, Reign of Terror and Planet of Giants.
It's not like The Missing Adventures. It doesn't say on the back what it's set, but in my head, it is set between Reign of Terror and Planet of Giants. Yeah.
When you're writing stuff like that, and knowing that you have such a keen affinity for archive television in the earliest days, do you sort of are you writing with black and white sets? Are you writing with sort of like multicam? Production styles in your mind.
I wasn't so much doing that. In fact, actually, the Doctor Who magazine review tells me off a bit for that, because I have the Doctor refer to a USB stick in it, which I thought was a really nice kind of fun. He's trying to explain a kind of data storage thing, and he says it's like a USB stick, and they look at him blankly. So he says, "Oh, well, a tightly coiled roll of microfilm then," so that Ian and Barbara can then understand. I mean, I was quite pleased with that. I thought that was a really nice little line, but David Richardson in Doctor Who magazine didn't like that, sadly. So it just goes to show, doesn't it, that you can be maybe too pleased with yourself about something. But he felt it. So I think he felt it kind of took him out of the era too much, of reference to a USB stick. But no, I didn't so much that. But it did help in the sense that I think it, as probably, I'm sure, legions of other people you've had on who've written for sort of classic Who TARDIS teams have probably told you. I think it does make it easier, because in your head how these people should speak and how they should act. And, I feel like I've been researching to write this for 40 years, rehearsing for this. So it made it easy in the sense I knew how they would react and how they would speak, and those characterizations were, well, hopefully I've done a good job of them. People might listen to it and think I've done a terrible job of them. But hopefully, I think that's one of the things that when you're writing a shared universe thing, especially a shared universe thing that comes from a film or a television series, you've got that characterization, and I think that does give you a tremendous amount of help.
How is it? I mean, it's your first drama, so you have a fiction rather. So you don't really have much to compare it to, but how is it different in your mind? We've always wanted to be a writer, writing a book or something like that, but now this is an audio book. So you're writing specifically for audiobook. Does that change your perspective when you're writing something?
Yeah, I think it does, in the sense that you have to make sure it's understandable when it's being listened to. And obviously as well, people are often listening to these while they're doing other things. They might listen to while they're doing housework or driving, or, people rarely, I think, kind of sit down and listen to an audiobook, just sort of sitting there to listen to it. I think quite often it's an accompaniment to something else. So I think you have to make sure it's understandable in that sense. I don't know if I had a kind of, I don't want to say advantage, but I've, for nearly 20 years now, I've worked in radio as a day job, as a radio producer and various other things in radio. So although that's not writing fiction, I think it gives you an awareness of, what you have to write to be understood, to be heard rather than seen, which I think does make a difference in certain things. And one of the things I did, which apparently Simon Gurrier told me that he does this with all his writing. To name drop there, with a well-known Doctor Who fan, he's helped me out on different research for different things down there. He's very kindly done that. But he says he does this with all his writing, not just audio stuff as well. But what I did with Starflight is I kind of read it out loud to myself when I was going through it and redrafting it, to make sure, well, A, to make sure that it kind of made sense, and B, to make sure that it was sayable. Because I think it was something I think I have had an awareness from working in radio, that it has to be sayable for the person who's got to read it out. Christopher Naylor, in this case, who does an absolutely brilliant job of it. And thanks to Morrison Ellis as well, the producer. But you want to make sure that it is something that the narrator can actually, get their mouth around, so to speak, and is actually, and can actually be read aloud in a fairly comfortable manner.
Mm-hmm. Christopher Naylor, of course, who does the voice of Harry Sullivan on the Big Finish audios.
Yeah.
Were you around for the recording of it?
No, sad. It didn't work out to be able to get the recording, sadly, which is, I would have absolutely loved that. That would have been such a great moment to be at, especially as they sometimes do them at Television Centre. I don't think this one was done at Television Centre, but the BBC Audio's kind of base is TVC. So imagine if you got to go to TVC to do a Doctor Who story. That would have been wonderful. But so that would have been emotional if that happened. But the bit that was emotional was I thought hearing it for the first time and hearing my name read out over that theme tune would be the emotional bit. I think I slightly ruined that for myself because I videoed like me putting the CD on to do a little social media video and playing it, and maybe I was too busy doing that to feel the emotion. So when I really felt the impact actually was at the end when the TARDIS leaves and you hear the sound of the TARDIS over my description of it at the end of the story, and that bit really got me. Hearing that sound effect over my writing, that was the bit that really got me in the kind of in the chest, in the feels, as the young people say. That was the moment where I thought, blimey, I've written a real life Doctor. I'd sort of reached the stage where I thought this was never going to happen because I'm 42 now. And I thought that the chance to ever do anything like this had kind of passed me by. And I'd also kind of worried that I would never be able to think of a good idea for a Doctor Who story. But it worked and it's happened. And now I keep thinking of Doctor Who stories and I've got nowhere to put them. So, yeah.
Well, perhaps a second Doctor Who audiobook is coming.
Well, I'd love to. I mean, I have submitted some ideas, so I would love to do another one if the chance came up. But I was always kind of worried that if this did ever happen, because I'd wondered down the years, what would happen if something like this came about, and I'd always worried that I would write the worst Doctor Who story of all time and would be universally lambasted by all and sundry. But fortunately, that doesn't seem to have happened. I joked about David Richardson's DWM review, but there's a nice review. He's very kind about the story. And I've had some other nice reviews online as well. So I think I have escaped being the worst Doctor Who story of all time. I know it sounds like a very low bar, but when this has been, as you will know, and this has been something that's dominated your life for so long, when you get the chance to actually contribute to it in this way, you do worry that you'll mess it up.
Well, it's out there now, and I'm sure people will love it. It's Doctor Who Starflight. It's available from from BBC Audiobooks from Penguin there, and also, of course, the documentary about Flight into Danger on BBC Sounds. Always lovely, Paul, to have you on the show for whatever book or project you're doing. Look forward to having you on again. Thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, coming from Telos later this year, the story of the Saturday slot before Doctor Who.
Perfect. I look forward to that as well. Thanks again, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And at the very end there, he wrote about that he's doing a book about from Telos Publishing about the time slot before Doctor Who and the year leading up to Doctor Who. That is more archived nonsense, nerdery, right?
That is esoteric genius.
Yeah, I admire that. I admire that level of madness. First of all, Stephen, if anybody should admire that level of madness, it's you.
Yeah, I absolutely do. Paul writes books that are just like, he's written like literally 2 books. They're both like fascinating reads. If you haven't picked up Pull to Open and The Long Game, they are incredible books. Absolutely fascinating stuff about the earliest days of both the old series and the new series. The audio doc, he gave me a sneak preview of the audio documentary. There's no links in the show notes yet because it's not on BBC Sounds yet, but that's what it'll be. Probably around the weekend where missing episodes are released on iPlayer and at the Riverside screening, of course, because the anniversary is April 3rd, 1956. It would have aired in Canada, so that might be time to when BBC Sounds puts it out. But I wanted to get Paul on now before all the craziness of the next couple weeks to come take over this podcast. So, very exciting days. Missing episodes, of course, being the main thrust of that, but other stuff, of course, is always happening in the world of Doctor Who. And we will talk about it here on Radio Free Skaro.
Neat.
Yep. All right. In the meantime, and in between time, I am Stephen in Edmonton.
Warren in Vancouver.
And Chris and Camrose. There, I'll do it.
So long for now.